It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Poland. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 25 on the players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers Poland's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We examine the participation of the players in games over the recent period, as well as a couple of other factors to categorize them into definite, likely, possible, and so on. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is selected. At that time, we'll go over the list that we create here and see who made it and who didn't. We'll also cover things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode will have three sections. Section one, where we look at some general information on the team. Section two, where we cover the main candidates in each position and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. And section three, where we summarize and have some concluding business. Let's begin then. Section one, some general information on the squad. So we'll begin with some retirements or players who seem to be retired because they haven't played for the team for a significant period. The first one is definitely retired. He announced his retirement. It's Jakub Błaszczykowski, and he was captain of Poland. He played for Poland from 2006 effectively to 2019, but he did play one game in 2023. That was kind of a memorial game. I'll just finish with his record: 109 caps and 21 goals. And well, all of these players will have been fairly major players in most of the tournaments over the past period. The last one he actually played in was the 2018 World Cup, but officially retired there in June of 2023. And it was a farewell game, and he came off the field with the Guard of Honor after 16 minutes. I believe they were playing Germany in that friendly. And then he announced his retirement from soccer altogether the following month. Next is Grzegorz Krychowiak. Grzegorz Krychowiak is actually still active. He's played in 2023, but last played in March of 2023, and he's 34 years old. He has 100 caps. He reached 100 caps and 5 goals in his career, and is currently still playing, though it seems more like retirement soccer in Saudi Arabia. So there is a chance of him coming back, but we are putting him in the retired section because that's what we think. Next, Kamil Glik was with the team from 2010 to 2022. He's also a Centurion with 103 caps and 6 goals, still playing club soccer, but has not appeared for the national team since the 2022 World Cup. So a big name there, all three of them big names for the team. And we move on to club affiliations for Poland. So they do have a couple of big players and big clubs. Probably the biggest is Robert Lewandowski. Obviously, he's the biggest. He's playing for Barcelona, and he has 148 caps and 82 goals. So a real veteran and superstar for them. Other big players, I would say the goalkeeper Wojciech Szczesny. He is playing for Juventus in Italy. And not the only player who is, actually. We also have our Arkadiusz Milik, a forward playing for Juventus in Italy. And we have a player with Arsenal, Jakub Kiwior, a defender for Arsenal. And another player to keep an eye on is midfielder Piotr Zielinski, kind of with a secondary team in a top league, as most of these players are. He plays for Napoli. And yeah, as I said, the range of countries they play in is quite wide. I would say Italy is the most represented, with teams like Napoli, Roma, Bologna, and so on. But also in England, Germany, and smaller leagues like Netherlands and Cyprus. So quite well represented, but I would say characterized by mostly kind of second-tier clubs on the whole. Okay, that's kind of look at their club affiliations. Let's move on to recent games. So we're examining the participation of players from the start of 2023. We may look at some of the players in World Cup 2022 to see how they lined up. But in terms of their participation over the recent period, we go from after the World Cup or the start of 2023. Poland played 12 games over that period. 2 of them were friendlies. Most teams were playing friendlies in March 2024, but not Poland. They were doing playoff games to reach this World Cup. So that's good because it gives us a chance to see you know, their best players. They're putting their best players out for those games. And I must say, even the 2 friendlies didn't see a lot of experimentation in terms of the player selection there. So that's good. In terms of their participation over recent international competitions, we'll go back to 2006. They've qualified for most of the tournaments from 2006. Just the 2010 World Cup and the 2014 World Cup they did not qualify for, but they qualified for all of the Euro Cups since 2004. I think they didn't make it, so since 2008. However, we won't be going back into the history of each player for all of these tournaments. We'll tend to go back to tournaments when talking about the players' history, and 1 or 2 clubs. When we did Poland's players for the 2022 World Cup, we went into a bit more detail. So you can find that media cast if you're looking for more details on the players' history. Otherwise, we'll try to keep it a little shorter for this one. Let's move on to their formations. And while we introduce kind of Poland's theme here, which is complexity. So they've used different formations over the period. Actually, we're going to hear that their manager, they changed their manager after the World Cup, and then they changed their manager after 6 games, so halfway through qualification here. So that adds to the complexity, and overall we really don't have a strong pattern here. We have a 3-5-2 being used 33% of the time, so 5 out of the 15 games, and that is under the new manager. So that is most of the or 5 of the 6 recent games were the 3-5-2. So maybe that's the one to keep in mind. We also have the 4-4-2 being used 4 out of 15 times, or 27% of the time. 2 of those were in the cup. We have a 5-3-2 being used 13% of the time, or twice. And 4 different formations, 27% of the time, or 4 times. So we have 7 different formations being used. It's all very complex there. So really no pattern that we can really keep in our head. Maybe the thing to notice here is 3 at the back is being used in, not in the World Cup, it's 4 at the back. In 2 of the 6 games in the first half of the period, we see that 3-man back line in a 5-3-2 formation. And then after the new manager arrives halfway through, we see mostly a a 3-5-2. So we'll presume that that's what they're going to use going forward. Okay, last thing we'll do in this section is look at their upcoming friendlies. So we have June 6th, they play Ukraine, and June 6th, they play Turkey at home, and on June 10th, they play Ukraine at home. So both of those at home, of course. The tournament's in Germany, and Poland is right next door, so they don't need to acclimatize or anything. All right, let's move on to section 2, and we begin with our look at the candidates. We begin with the manager, and we'll give a little story on management over the last little while. I just have to find my spot here. Okay, so the current manager is Michael Probiers. So we'll give a little biography on him. He has no tournament experience. He's been with the Poland national team since 2023 and was with the under-21 team before that. And mostly he has managed clubs in Poland, some of the bigger clubs in Poland, and also Aris Thessalonika in Greece was the only club outside of Poland that he managed. He's been managing since 2005. All right. I'm just going to go to the kind of the summary of the position here and give a little history over the last little while. So we begin in 2018 with Jerzy Breczek, very hard to pronounce, Breczek, manager from 2018 World Cup to 2021. We're going to see that's a fairly long term for the Polish team. A string of managers followed. It was Paulo Sousa in 2021, Czesław Michniewicz in 2022, and Fernando Sanchez in 2023. So all three managers in a row, none of them lasting more than a year. More close to the Cup here, Sanchez was the manager at the beginning of 2024 Euro Cup qualifications, but after losing away to Moldova and Albania, he was let go, and Probiers was moved up from an actually successful spell with the under-21 team there, moved up to the senior team in September of 2023. So in truth, his campaign didn't improve much. They tied the last two games there, but Poland did qualify through the playoff. So that's why they were playing two playoff games there in March of 2024. So Michael Probiers, anyway, the manager, taking them through the tournament. Let's go to goalkeepers then, and we'll begin by listing our candidates. So we have a definite candidate in Wojciech Szczesny, and two likely candidates in Lukasz Skorupski and Marcin Bulka. And for those following on the YouTube, you'll see that Szczesny and Skorupski are in black script, whereas Bulka is in grey script. That means Bulka doesn't have tournament experience. We have a player seemingly off the team in Bartłomiej Dragowski, and a player who is also seemingly off the team. We'll put him as retired because he's been off the team for longer. That's Kamil Grabara. So let's just deal with those. Dragowski, no tournament experience, and he was actually on the bench for the first 6 matches in 2023, but not on the bench for the last 6 matches, not called up. Kamil Grabara has not appeared since he was on the bench in the 2022 World Cup. So he was selected for that tournament, but not selected since. Okay, let's meet our candidates here. Wojciech Szczesny is 34 years old, and he has 81 caps since 2009, plays for Juventus in Italy, and was with Arsenal for a long time prior to that. So he's been part of every tournament actually since 2012 and a starter in them. Um, and he had since started 11 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup. He was on the bench for just one of those matches. So couldn't be more of a definite candidate, Wojciech Szczesny. Next, Lukas Skorupski. He is 33 years old, but only has 9 caps for the national team since 2012. And he plays for Bologna in Italy since 2011 and was with Roma prior to that. He was called up for the last 2 tournaments, Euro 2020 and World Cup 2022, was on the bench for those, a backup keeper, and he remains that. He started one of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, and he was on the bench for 9 and not selected for 2 others. Yeah, so he is a likely candidate, and we'll talk about it a bit more in the summary. Finally, Marcin Bulka. He's 24 years old and joined the team in 2023 for his first cap. And he plays for Nice in France and was with Paris Saint-Germain in France for or before that. So he got his first appearance on the bench in September of 2023. Didn't start any of their 8 remaining games, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 7 others. So basically the replacement for Dragowski there, and he looks likely to be selected for the tournament. Let's finish this with a summary of the position. So Wojciech Szczesny in all 3 games of the World Cup, and then all 12 games after, except for 1. That was the 3rd last match, a friendly with Latvia. In that case, Skorupski started, suggesting that he is the 2nd string keeper. Okay, let's move on to the defense, and we begin with central defenders. And I'll just talk a little bit about the structure of the defense. So in the World Cup, and for 4 of the first 6 games, it was 4 at the back. So that means 2 central defenders. And under the new manager, it changed to being a 3 at the back or 3 central defenders. We did see actually in the first half they had 5 at the back, which is also 3 central defenders, and that is the structure. And we'll talk about the candidates after we introduce them. So we have Jan Bednarek as a definite candidate, and also Jacob Kiwior, definite candidate. We go now down to just possible, so no likely candidates. And Thomas Kedziora is possible. We have quite a few here. Paweł Dawidowicz and Bartosz Salomon. Also possible. Actually, not as many as I thought, just the 3 of them. But we do have 3 candidates who are possible but unlikely. Patrick Peda is one of them. Sebastian Walukovic, and in between there is Paweł Bokniewicz. So 3 of them, and we will talk about them. We have Przemysław Wisniewski, seemingly off the squad. He was injured for the last 8 matches, and actually just got his first appearance in June of 2023. So he was on the bench for 1 game and then injured for 8 matches. So doesn't seem likely. We have the player who we put as retired, Kamil Glik, last appeared in the 2022 World Cup. Arthur Jedrzejczyk, good Lord. Arthur Jedrzejczyk, I really don't know how to pronounce it. Also, we could have introduced him as maybe one of the retired players because he has been involved in tournaments, though not much as a starter. But after 41 caps with the national team, he last appeared in the 2022 World Cup. And also Kamil Piatkowski also retired, last appeared on the bench in September 2021. So a lot of candidates there, but we'll go back over and look at them, starting with Jan Bednarek. So he's 28 years old and has been with Poland since 2017 with 56 caps and 1 goal. He is currently on the roster. No, he is playing for Southampton in England since 2017. He had a short loan spell with Aston Villa recently. Not too recently, 2022 to 23. Bednarek was a sub in the World Cup in 2018 and in 2022, but he was a starter in the 2020 Euro. And actually, in the 2018 World Cup, he earned a starting position after game 1. Bednarek has started 10 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup and was not selected for 2 matches. So a definite candidate here. Next, we had Jakub Kiwior, and we actually should put him first on the list. You'll see why shortly. Kiwior is 24 years old and has 21 caps and 1 goal since 2022, so has inserted himself into the team very quickly. He plays for Arsenal in England since 2023. That was a big move up from Spezia, where he played before, Spezia in Italy. So selected for the World Cup in 2022 and started all games there. And he's the only player on the team who has started all 12 of their games over this period. So that's why we're moving him ahead of Bednarek. Next, we move down to the possible candidates, Thomas Kedzidora, and actually he's coded as a right back, but we've moved him here because his starts were as a central defender. Kedzidora is 29 years old and has 32 caps and 1 goal since 2017. And he plays for Dynamo Kyiv in Ukraine since 2017, but he was loaned out recently to PAOK in Greece since 2023. So not selected for the World Cup, or actually for the, World Cup in 2018 or in 2022, and in the 2020 Euro Cup, he was on the roster but saw no action. However, he seems to be getting more starts now. He started 6 of their 12 games here, was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 4 others. That includes the first 2 and the last 2 matches. So Kedzidora, a possible candidate here. Paweł Dawidowicz is 29 years old and has been with the team since 2015, but only 9 caps in that time. Dawidowicz plays for Hellas Verona in Italy since 2019, and his first tournament was the Euro 2020. He was a sub there, but he wasn't selected for the World Cup in 2022, just made the preliminary squad there. So over this period, he returned after a 16-month absence. At the beginning of the period, he came back in March 2023 and started 2 games. They were the last 2 games there. Otherwise, he was on the bench for 3, injured for 4, and not selected for 3 matches. So making a late entry is Paweł Dawidowicz. Our third possible candidate is I thought there was more than 3. Okay, I forgot to present Mateusz Witeska on the list. He actually comes next, so we have 4 possible candidates. Witeska is 27 years old and played with Poland since 2022 with 4 caps and no goals. He plays for Cagliari in Italy since 2023 and in France before that. Witeska was selected for the World Cup in 2022, just on the bench there. And he has since started 1 of their 12 games. Subbed in for 1, but on the bench for 6, but not selected for 4 matches. Those are the first 2 and the last 2 the last two matches. So it never bodes well when you're not selected in the games leading up to the Cup. But even when he is selected, he's more of a sub. Okay, our final possible candidate is 33-year-old Bartosz Salaman. He has 11 caps for the national team, no goals since 2013, so also struggles to insert himself into the team. The only tournament he's been part of was the 2016 Euro Cup, where he was on the bench. He returned after a year-long absence in March 2023 and started one of their games. He was subbed in for the last one, so that recent participation is good. And he was on the bench for two games. But during this period, he was suspended for a doping ban for 8 games. It doesn't seem like they're really holding that against him, though, because he returned, he was called up after the doping ban. So we have Bartosz Salaman as a possible candidate. Next, we'll take a quick look at the possible but unlikely. Patrick Peda is new to the squad since 2023. He started 2 games there. I have 2 games of, yes, he started 2 games and was subbed in for 1 game, but not selected for the last 2 matches there. So actually, we could put him as a possible, but again, when they're not selected for the last few matches, we do lower their likelihood. Next, Paweł Boczniewicz, and he returned after a 3-year absence and started 1 game. He was on the bench for 1, and then he was injured for 1 and not selected for the last match. So kind of a brief return to the club, really, because he was on the preliminary squad for the 2022 World Cup. So he has been around for a while. Sebastian Walukiewicz also has 3 caps for the national team since 2020, just like Boczniewicz. And he was back with the team after an almost 3-year absence. And he was on the bench for 2 games, including the last match. So, you know, these guys are possible candidates, just not likely. So Walukiewicz with some recent participation there, but no starts and not even a substitution appearance for him in this period. Okay, that is a lot of players to talk about, but we are filling potentially 3 positions here, at least 2 positions. So those are the candidates, and I'll just summarize the situation. So in the World Cup, it was a 2-man position, central defense, and it was Glik and Kiwior in all 3 games. Bednarek and Kiwior were the starting pair after the Cup, and although that did go through some changes, by the end of the period, they were 2 of the 3 central defenders for the last 4 games. Kedziora came in as the 3rd central defender towards the beginning when it changed to a 3-man backline in Game 3. And he actually continued for several games, but then eventually disappeared about 2/3 of the way through. We also had several players appearing for single games, one of them in Game 2, but more towards the end. And Peda is the only one to have seen more than 1 start. He started twice. Also starting twice, but more significantly, was Dadovic, who came in for the last 2 games. And he was the center of the 3-man central defense, flanked on the left by Kiwior and on the right by Bednarek. So that has been the defensive setup for the last 2 games. All right, that was complex, but wow, we haven't even gotten to the midfield yet, which is even more so. But let's look at the left backs. So I'll just talk about the position again. Left back exists in the four-man lineup and even in the five-man lineup. But when it changes to a three-man back line, there's no left back. For many teams, it's a left back player pushing up to the left wing. But for Poland, it's not. There are separate wingers. The players are coded as wingers. And in fact, in the five-man back line, those wingers came back to play left back and right back. Let's look at the candidates. We have Timotheus Puchas as a possible candidate here. And we have Bartłomiej Widowic as a possible but unlikely candidate, and then Michael Carbonek as a seemingly off-the-squad player. So no definite or likely players here, but we do have out-of-position players playing as left back. Let's look at these candidates, though. Timotheus Puchas is 25 years old and has 13 caps and no goals since 2021. He plays for Union Berlin in Germany since 2021, but was on loan to Kaiserslautern in Germany since 2023. It may be that by the time you hear this, those loan spells are ended. But we're just going to present them as if it's kind of near the end of the season. Most of these players, if their loan spell has ended or if they've been traded, it hasn't happened by this time. Okay, Puchas was a substitute in Euro 2020 and gained a starting position there. However, for the World Cup in 2022, despite being on the preliminary squad, he didn't make the final cut, which was a bit of a surprise. In this period, he returned after a 9-month absence at the beginning in March 2023 and didn't start any games, was subbed in for one. That's the second match. Subbed in for the second last match. He was on the bench for 3, including 2 of the 3 matches, and not selected or injured otherwise. So Puchas is kind of making a comeback towards the end here, getting some field time. So we have him as a possible candidate. Bartłomiej Widowic is, we won't introduce him. We'll just say that he first appeared on the bench in November 2023, was a sub in 1 game and on the bench for the other, but not selected for the last 2 matches. So just poking his head in the door is Widowic. And finally, Michael Carbonek actually has played during this period. He was on the bench in March 2023, but did not appear after that. Okay, those are the 3 candidates, and let's summarize the position. So under the 4-man backline during the World Cup, it was actually an out-of-position player, Berezinski, a right back, who played the position in all 3 games. In 4 of the games in the first half of the period, Kiwior played the position 3 times. And as we said, in the 2 games with 5 at the back, it was wingers covering both left and right back position. So we'll talk about those later when we cover wingers. Okay, let's move on to the right back position. And we have a possible candidate as our top level here, just a possible. We have Maddie Cash at the possible level and Bartosz Berezinski, who started as a left back in the World Cup there. Thomas Kedziora, who we introduced as a central defender, is actually coded as a right back but didn't play here. And then we have Robert Gumney, who is off the squad. We'll put him in the retired section because he hasn't appeared. We'll put him in seemingly off the squad because he did appear in March 2023 on the bench, but hasn't been called up since then. Gumney was actually selected for the 2022 World Cup, just on the bench there, but hasn't played since, or hasn't played then, or anyway, he is off. Hasn't been called up since, is what I'm saying. Okay, let's look at the candidates. We have Matty Cash, and he is 26 years old and has been with Poland since 2021 and has 15 caps and 1 goal. He's born in England and all of his clubs have been in England, currently with Aston Villa since 2020, and was selected for the World Cup, was a starter in that tournament, but hasn't started so much since. Partly due to injury. He has started 3 of their 12 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. But actually, he was only injured for 1 game, the last game, although he has recovered since. And for 5 of the games, he simply wasn't selected. So Matty Cash, just a possible candidate here. Bartosz Berezinski is 31 years old and has 54 caps since 2013, and he plays for Sampdoria in Italy since 2017, but loaned to Empoli in Italy since 2023. So he was a sub in World Cup 2018, but gained a starting position and was a starter in Euro 2020. And as we saw, as a as a left back in World Cup 2022. But he hasn't started so much since. He's started only 3 of their 12 games since the World Cup, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. That includes the last match, so he has some recent experience or recent participation. But he was out for 2 separate injuries with for 3 matches and not selected for 3 of the last 4 matches. So his kind of patchy participation over this period has us putting him as a possible candidate. Okay, and Robert Company we talked about, so let's review the position. So basically everything I said about the left side is true on the right. In the World Cup, it was Matty Cash in this position, and he started there after the Cup too, but right winger Frankowski played 2 and Berezinski played 3. That was in the first half of the period. In the second half, the right back position kind of disappears, or we could say it becomes a winger position. Cash did appear there once, but otherwise the position was played by wingers, who we will meet soon. Okay, let's move on to the midfield. And wow, this gets very complex. So I've tried to simplify things by, not going into too much detail here. Basically, we have, because of all the different formations and players moving around in positions, it's too much to kind of detail in it. So we won't go too deep into the details. But a good place to start is Zielinski here, because he appears all over the midfield. Probably more as a defensive or central midfielder in this period than as an attacking midfielder, but we are going to see him there too when we get to the attacking midfield. So just as a general midfielder here, Piotr Zielinski, we'll call him a versatile midfielder, and he's a definite candidate. He's 33 years old and has 88 caps and 11 goals since 2013, and he plays for Napoli in Italy since 2018. So he was a substitute in Euro 2016, but a starter in all the tournaments since then. World Cup 2018 and 2022, as well as Euro 2020. He's a starter in this period too, starting 10 of their 12 games, on the bench for 1 and injured for 1. So Piotr Zielinski, look for him on the field. He could be anywhere. Okay, let's move on to defensive midfielders. And we'll begin with introducing likely candidate Jakub Piotrowski and possible candidate Taras Romanchuk. And seemingly, or sorry, possible but unlikely, Patrick Zigzag. And we actually met the Gregors Krychowiak in the retired section. So he did play during this period, though, so is part of the narrative. We also have two players seemingly off the squad. Actually, I will put Krychowiak seemingly off the squad because he did play in this period. Christian Bielik and Ben Liederman, all of those seemingly off the squad. And I'll just talk about them now because we won't go through an introduction. We saw in the retirement section that Krychowiak did play in March 2023, but has not appeared after that. Christian Bielik was a substitute in World Cup 2022, but hasn't been selected for the last 8 matches. And Ben Liederman first appeared in March 2023. He was on the bench for the first 4 games and then not selected after that. And in fact, the last 2 games, he was out with surgery. So doesn't look like someone who's going to make the cut. Let's go back and look at the candidates who are more likely to. Jakub Piotrowski, we do have him at the likely level. He's 26 years old and has been with Poland just since 2023 with 5 caps and 2 goals. And actually, he was selected for the preliminary squad for the World Cup. That was a bit of a surprise. He had appeared on the bench shortly before the Cup in September 2022, but hadn't appeared before that. So he came back after a 13-month absence after that single appearance, came back in October 2023 and went on to start 4 of their remaining 6 games. And he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for the other. So very solid recent participation for Piotrowski. And I forgot to say his club. It's Ludogorets Razgrad in Bulgaria. So he looks like a likely candidate here. Next, we have Taras Romanchuk, and he was a Ukrainian-born. He's a Ukrainian-born player, 32 years old, but only 2 caps for the national team, even though he's been on it since 2018. So he actually came back after a 6-year absence in March 2024. So just recently, he didn't start either of the 2 games, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for the other. So he plays for Białystok in Poland since 2023. So since 2014. So when a player shows up like this right at the end, you have to put them as a possible candidate there. Okay, and then we have the possible but unlikely Patrick Zigzag. And he actually did get 2 starts over this period, but he wasn't selected for the last 4 matches. So there is a chance of him coming in, but not likely. Okay, that is it there. But we won't summarize the position. We'll move on to central midfielders. I think I've said that actually it becomes very difficult to separate defensive, central, and attacking midfielders for Poland. But we will do defensive and central midfielders together, and then look further upfield for other categories. So central midfielders, we have 2 likely candidates. Bartosz Sliz is the first of them, and the other Damian Szymanski. And then at the possible but unlikely level, we have a lot of candidates. So Karol Linetti, Jakub Moder, Mateusz Legowski, Karol Struski, and Simon Zurkowski is actually seemingly off the squad here. We'll even put him in the retirement section because he hasn't appeared for the national team since the 2022 World Cup, which he was selected for, but on the bench for. So Simon Zurkowski seems to be off the team. Let's look at these candidates. Bartosz Sliz is 25 years old and has 8 caps since 2021, so not used that much. He plays for Atlanta United in the USA since 2024 and was with Legia Warsaw before that. He was not a consideration really for the World Cup in 2022, but he returned after an 18-month absence in June 2023 and started 4 of their remaining 10 games, as well as subbing in for 3 and on the bench for 2. Just one match that he was not called up for after returning to the team. So Bartosz Sliz, a likely candidate. Also, we have Damian Szymanski, and he is 28 years old, 17 caps and 2 goals since 2018. And he's with AEK Athens in Greece since 2020. He was selected for the World Cup in 2022 and appeared in 1 game as a substitute, the last game there. And Damian Szymanski started 4 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, just like Sliz. And he subbed in for 3 and was on the bench for 4. So he too was selected for all matches except 1. So he looks like a likely candidate too. Karol Linetti, more of a veteran for the team, with 47 caps and 5 goals, although the most he has gotten was being selected for a tournament, but sitting on the bench. And then in 2022, selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. But he's been around for a long time. And in this period, he was got 3 appearances as a substitute and was on the bench for 1, but not selected for the last 6 matches. So that's why he's possible but unlikely. Jacob Moder has been struggling with injury quite a bit. And he was, returned after a 2-year absence because he was out with a cruciate ligament injury, and just came back in March 2024, and he subbed into 1 game and then wasn't selected for the last game. So I think people have been waiting for Jacob Moder to make his mark for a long time. He plays for Brighton in England, or he doesn't play for them because he's been injured so much. But we could see him more in the future. Matusz Legowski was on the bench for 3 games during this period and not selected for 9 others. And finally, Karol Struski got his first cap in November 2023, was subbed in for 1, and then injured for the last 2 matches. So all of these players have a chance of making the squad, but they're all kind of unlikely for one reason or another, usually because of recent participation or recent non-participation. All right, so that's a lot of candidates to go through. But we are looking probably at 2 or maybe 3 positions here. So just like central defense. The Cup started with a 4-1-4-1 formation. That requires a stopper, usually a defensive midfielder. And Krychowiak was the stopper there. And he continued as one of 2 defensive or central midfielders in the next 2 games. And Krychowiak was partnered by Bielek. So both of them appeared briefly after the Cup, but then kind of disappeared. Linetti then appeared more, and Zielinski, who appears all over the place, also showing up in this position. In the second half of the period, under the new manager, all of these players disappear except for Zielinski. and now we have a 3-5-2 formation. Two wingers, but three kind of nebulous central attacking defensive kind of midfielders really only distinguished by the designation that they have. So we're kind of going with what the player is designated. Anyway, we do need to simplify this very complex situation. So we are going to do it by the designation of the players. And among the defensive and central midfielders listed here, Piotrowski and Sliz appeared the most in the second half under the new manager. Each of them started 4 of the 6 games. Damian Szymanski, who shouldn't be confused with the attacking midfielder Sebastian Szymanski. Damian Szymanski also started 4 games over the period. 2 of them were in the first half of the period, and 2 of them in the last half here. So yes, the likely candidates, Piotrowski and Sliz seem the most likely candidate at this point in time, and Damian Szymanski to a lesser degree, but still in the mix. But it really is a mix. Okay, let's go to left of the position of left and right midfielder, and this position does exist in a 4-3-3 formation. Poland never uses that. It can arguably seen as a role in a couple of the formations that they have used, but generally we're going to cover those formations elsewhere and just cover the candidates coded as left and right midfielders here. So these players won't have played a lot. First one is Kamil Grosicki. He's a veteran with the team, 35 years old, and has 93 caps and 17 goals since 2008. And he's been playing in Poland since 2021, but did play in England before that. Part of the squad since Euro 2012, but not selected for the Euro 2020 Cup, quite shockingly, actually. And over the period, so he's kind of drifting off the team here. Didn't start any of their 12 games, but he was subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 3, and not selected for for 4 matches. But those were the first 4 matches. So I only mean drifting off the team in terms of being a starter. He's still very much in the mix in terms of selection. So that's why we have him as a likely candidate. I think I forgot to put him on the list, but Kamil Grosicki, a likely selection for the squad. On the right, though, we only have a player who is possible but unlikely, who's coded as a right midfielder, and that is Pavel Wozolek. Pavel Wozolek. Yes, and he returned after 6 years to start one of their remaining 8 games. He returned in September 2023, started 1, subbed in for 2, and on the bench for 3, but then not selected for the last 2 matches. So perhaps a bit harsh to put him as possible, but unlikely. But he had been absent for 6 years from the team prior to that. So again, that doesn't mean he doesn't have a chance, just a limited chance. Okay, that's those positions. We're going to move on upfield, and we're actually reorganizing things a little bit for Poland compared to other teams. So I'll just talk about that. We're going to create categories for left wingers and right wingers solely here. And most formations cover this position. Sometimes we organize it as part of the defensive role, as in a left back moving up, or the attacking role. We're not going to do the general left and right attacking roles here. But for Poland, the winger position is its own position. So let's take a look at the candidates here. We have Nikola Zaluski as a likely candidate, and Jakub Kaminski as a possible candidate. Let's look at them. Zalewski is 22 years old and has 16 caps and no goals since 2021. And he is with Roma in Italy since 2021. That's his first club. He was with Roma's youth club for 10 years before that and was in fact born in Italy. And he was selected for the World Cup in 2022. He started game one, but was subbed out at halftime and lost his starting position there. Since the beginning of this period, he has started 6 of their 12 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1, and 4 matches that he wasn't called up for. So Zalewski, a likely candidate. Jakub Kaminski is 21 years old, so a year younger than Zalewski, and he similarly has 14 caps and 1 goal since 2021. And he plays for Wolfsburg in Germany since 2022. He also was a starter in the World Cup there, and he did keep his position. He didn't keep his position. He started games 1 and 4 and was a sub in games 2 and 3. And I suddenly realized in a blinding flash that I've only been talking about the first 3 games of the 2022 World Cup. Only been talking about the positions in the group stage, and have been completely ignoring the fact that they did play in the round of 16. Anyway, we're too far along to go back and redress all of that. So we'll just keep going as we're going here. Jakub Kaminski has started 4 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup. He subbed in for 2 and was on the bench for 2, and with the under-21 team for the last 4 matches. But that really means kind of not selected for the senior squad. So we might actually put him as possible, but unlikely here, not appearing in the last 4 matches. But we'll leave him here as a possible candidate. Let's take a look at the position of left winger then. In the World Cup, Zalewski played the role in game 1, but it was right winger Frankowski starting the next 2 games of the group stage. Zalewski and Kaminski alternated in the position after the Cup. Kaminski kind of dropped out of the mix after the first half, and right winger Frankowski came back for 2 more games before Zalewski started the last 4 matches. So that is the situation on the left wing. On the right wing, we begin with a definite candidate who we've talked about several times, both as a right back and as a left winger. So Przemysław Frankowski, a definite candidate, and we also have Michael Skóras as a possible candidate. So let's look at Frankowski. He is 29 years old and has 40 caps and 3 goals since 2018, and he plays for Lens in France since 2021. He was over in the USA with Chicago Fire for a couple of years before that. Not selected for the 2018 World Cup, just on the preliminary squad there, but a substitute in Euro 2020 and started as a substitute in the World Cup, but gained a starting position there, and since has started 9 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, subbed in for 1 and injured for 2 others. So he is also fairly versatile, as we saw. So we may see him starting in other positions too. Michael Skóras is 24 years old and has 7 caps since 2022. He plays for Club Brugge in Belgium since 2023 and was with Lech Poznan in Poland for 5 years before that. Selected for the World Cup, but appeared only as a substitute in Game 3 and started only 1 of their 12 games over this period, subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 1, but not selected for the last 6 matches. So I actually am going to move him down to possible but unlikely given that recent participation. So Michael Skóras, a possible but unlikely candidate. Okay, let's look at this position. So it was actually left winger Kaminski, who we just met there, starting in the World Cup, but the versatile midfielder Zielinski started the last 2 games or last two games of the group stage. After the cup, a few players appeared, but right back, Matty Cash and Frankowski dominated the role. Cash actually dropped out in the second half, leaving Frankowski to start the last four matches. So actually this winger position has been quite stable for the last four matches, with Zalewski starting on the left and Frankowski starting on the right. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is just attacking midfielder, more central players here in the way we've organized this midfield. So let's look at the candidates here. We have Sebastian Szymanski as a definite candidate. And Piotr Zielinski, we moved to talk about him as a versatile midfielder at the beginning of the midfield section. He is actually coded as an attacking midfielder, and we'll see he has played that a little bit too. We have a possible but unlikely candidate in Filip Marczewski. And then two players seemingly off the squad, Kasper Kozlowski and Adrian Benedziak. And I'll just dispense with those quickly here. So Kozlowski joined the team after an almost 2-year absence in September of 2023 and was on the bench for one game and then not selected after that, with the under-21 team for 4 of those, but ultimately not selected for the last 7 matches. So Kozlowski not looking like a candidate here. He was selected for the Euro 22 squad. The Euro 2020 squad, I should say. Adrian Benedziak, on the other hand, brand new to the squad, first appearing in September 2023, and he also was on the bench for just 1 match and then not selected for the last 6. So neither of those candidates looking possible here. Let's go back and look at Sebastian Szymanski. He's 25 years old, with 32 caps and 3 goals since 2019. And he plays for Fenerbahce in Turkey since 2023 and was with Dynamo Moscow in Russia prior to that, actually loaned to Feyenoord in the Netherlands for the last year of that stint. Not selected for the... he was selected way back in 2018 for the preliminary squad of the World Cup, but didn't make the final cut and wasn't selected for Euro 2020, which was a bit surprising because he seemed a likely candidate by that time. But he was selected for the World Cup in 2022, and he has since started 7 of their 12 games since the World Cup and subbed in for 5 others, so definite in terms of being selected for the squad, but not so much in being a starter. Filip Marczewski is our possible but unlikely candidate. He got his first appearance in October 2023, but not selected for the last 4 matches. He's kind of an up-and-comer, though. He turned professional at just 16 years of age with Lech Poznan. And so we might see him in the future. Okay, those are the candidates for the attacking midfield role. So let's summarize the position. It's actually hard to distinguish central midfielders and attacking midfielders in their formations. But again, we'll deal with the balance by looking at the candidates we haven't met yet and according to their designated position or their coded position. Poland used a 4-4-2 in the cup, so this position would be really doesn't exist. It's just 2 generically central midfielders. But Szymanski is the only attacking midfielder who appeared there that we haven't met. So he started the first game of the World Cup there. And he also started game 4, which I've been heretofore ignoring. Szymanski appeared regularly after that. fairly regularly, 7 of the 12 games, but not in the last 2 games. And the versatile Zielinski also appeared in the attack more centrally. Okay, that is the Cobb's web of the midfield finished with. So I forgot to put the candidates there. No, I didn't. Just I have to get rid of this graphic for attacking midfielders because we're moving on to forwards now, and we don't have any players coded as secondary strikers, so we move directly to kind of more center forward type players and begin with Robert Lewandowski. So he is a definite candidate. And we have Karol Swiderski, also a definite candidate, and Arkadiusz Milik as a likely candidate. I have him as a possible candidate. Really, I think of him as a likely candidate, but we'll put him where I got him. No, I'm going to switch him to a likely candidate here. We also have Adam Buksa as a likely candidate. And then we have Krzysztof Piatek as a possible candidate. Let's go back and look at them. So Robert Lewandowski, a long history with the team. He's 35 years old now and has been with the team since 2008. 148 caps with a stunning 82 goals there. And he's the captain of Poland. He plays for Barcelona in Spain since 2022 and was with Bayern Munich in Germany for 8 years before that. So, of course, part of many tournaments way back from the World Cup in 2016. He wasn't a starter there, but has been very important since they're starting all tournaments since 2008. Since Euro 2012. So Lewandowski is still very active, started 10 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup. He was injured for 2 matches. So Robert Lewandowski, a definite candidate. Karol Swiderski, also definite. He's 27 years old and 30 caps and 10 goals, so a fairly good scoring percentage himself. Been with Poland since 2021, and he is on the roster of an American team, Charlotte FC, since 2022, but actually has been loaned to Hellas Verona in Italy since 2024. He was a sub in Euro 2020, but gained a starting position, but just a sub in the 2022 World Cup. And Swiderski started 5 of their 12 games over this recent period, but he subbed in for 6 and was on the bench for 1. So he is always called up. So Karol Swiderski, a definite candidate. Let's take a look at Arkadiusz Milik and decide for sure whether he's a possible or a likely candidate. Milik is 30 years old with 72 caps and 17 goals since 2012, and he plays for Juventus in Italy since 2023. And he's been selected for all of the tournaments except the Euro 2020, which he was injured for. I should have said all of the tournaments since 2016, not Euro 2020, and was a more of a substitute in the World Cup 2022. He did start game 2 there. Since then, he started 4 of their 12 games, subbing in for 1 and on the bench for 1. Was injured a little bit there, including for the last 2 matches, and not selected for 2 others. So I think I see why I put him down to possible because of that injury in the last 2 matches. However, he has recovered from that injury. He's not tagged as injured. So I think we'll keep Arkadiusz Milik then as a likely candidate. More likely probably than Adam Buksa, who is 27 years old, 14 caps and 6 goals for him since 2021 with the national team, and plays for Lens in France since 2022. He also spent a little time in the USA. Buxa. An ankle injury prevented his selection from the World Cup in 2022. But since then, he has, so he returned from a 16-month absence in the second half of the period in October 2023 and started one of their games, subbed in for 4, and was on the bench for 1 other. So yes, that recent participation has us putting him as a likely candidate here. Finally, we have Krzysztof Piatek, who is 28 years old, also has a decent scoring record with 28 caps and 11 goals, and with the national team since 2018. And he plays for Istanbul Başakşehir in Turkey. He's been with the team since 2018, but was not selected for the World Cup in 2018 or the Euro Cup in 2020. He was just on the preliminary squad in 2018. He was selected, though, for World Cup 2022 and was a substitute there. He didn't start any of their games since then, but he was subbed in for the last one and on the bench for 3 others. So I guess that recent participation is the reason we have him as a possible candidate here. But overall, he seems almost unlikely. Okay, that actually, no, we got to do the summary of the forwards and then we'll be finished our look at the candidates. So for the position, it's usually a 2-man attack, but sometimes just 1. Lewandowski was there in all games of the Cup and all but 2 of the games afterwards. After playing alone in game 1, Milik and Swiderski each partnered with Lewandowski over the final 2 group stage games of the Cup. And after the Cup, they continued to alternate partnering with Lewandowski whenever Lewandowski was not alone. And in one of the games where Lewandowski was injured, they actually paired with each other. So that is Milik and Swiderski. The other 2 players each came in for single starts, so they're not really starter material there. Very hard to get ahead of Lewandowski anyway, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when he retires, whether this is his last tournament or whether he'll try to make it to the World Cup. His time will come in the next few years. Let's move on to the section 3, beginning with some closing thoughts. So this has been a long media cast because Poland is very complex. They also have a lot of players that are kind of off the team, so recently have not been playing or else haven't been playing for, say, a year or 2. Very complex to organize, especially in the midfield. But anyway, let's run through the team again and see if there are any players we can nominate as definite starters. Michael Probiers is their manager, and I don't think that's going to change. So we will nominate him as a starter, so to speak. And definitely in goal, we are confident that Wojciech Szczesny will be a starter. And actually also quite confident that Skorupski is the second string keeper there. When we move to central defense, it's actually Kiwior, definitely a starter there. Sorry, I'm just going to look at my my notes on Jan Bednarek because I'm a bit doubtful on him as being a starter. No, I think we can nominate both of those, Kiwior and Bednarek. And recently they've been going with a 3-man defense, so there is another player. For the last 2 games, it was Dawidovic, but it was very unsettled before there. So we're not ready to nominate Dawidovic as the third. But whoever it is, if they go with the 3-man defense, it looks like Bednarek and Kiwior do look like definite starters there. For left-back position, we actually don't have any definite or likely candidates. Kiwior has moved over there when they have the position, and he's probably the most likely candidate for it, but we're not ready to nominate a candidate. Kiwior plays more in central defence. On the right side, similarly, the highest candidate is just at the possible level, and Berezynski seems a bit more likely. Matty Cash seems a bit more likely than Berezynski here, but we're not confident because sometimes right wingers play the position. So actually, it's been right winger Frankowski in this area of the field, but more as a winger. So we'll get to him when he's a winger. The truth is they haven't used the right back position for most of the second half of 2023 and going forward. Defensive midfielders, we created a special category for the versatile midfielder Piotr Zielinski, and sorry, my tongue is all over the place here. Zielinski, we think will appear. We're just not sure where he'll appear on the field. He's been playing a bit more on the defensive or central end, but also appears on the attacking end as well. So you can look for him anywhere on the field. For defensive midfielders solely, Jacob Piotrowski is together with a few other candidates, Bartosz Sliz and Damian Szymanski. We think those 3 players might appear as starters, but we're not confident enough to nominate any of them because they're not regular enough starters for us to say so. So this is a bit of a spider's web of candidates, and we can't really nominate any of them as starters. But those 3 I mentioned seem the most likely. Poland almost always uses wingers in their formation, so we have a category just for wingers, and the top candidate on left wing is Nikola Zalewski. He did start the last 4 games, but it was kind of up in the air before that, so we're not ready to nominate him as a starter, but he probably, or he is the most likely candidate. On the right side, though, we can nominate Przemysław Frankowski as a starter, even if they use a 4-man defense and he doesn't play as a winger. He very well might appear as a right back, and we also have seen him on the left side too. So we think he'll be a starter, probably as a right winger, but somewhere on the field. Sebastian Szymanski is an attacking midfielder who we do think will be a starter. Again, not dead sure. Just somewhere generally in the midfield, because I think we have seen him even when they don't have an attacking midfielder position. So Sebastian Szymanski. And of course, up front, we fully expect Robert Lewandowski to be the starter. But it could be a 2-man offense, and so Swiderski and Milik, both candidates to start. Probably Swiderski has started a little bit more over the period, so we would kind of favor him, but not enough to nominate him as a definite starter, because in a lot of the games there's just one centre forward, and it's Robert Lewandowski if it is. Okay, that is our look at the candidates, and we will move on to the last part of the section 3, a review of injuries, or the second last part. But for Poland, luckily, they have no injury concerns at this time. So we'll check in with that in part 2 to see if it's still that way. And that is our last order of business here, just a preview of part 2, which we're going to do when the final squad is selected. And we can go back over our list here and show you and show ourselves too which ones made it and which ones didn't. And we'll pay particular attention to any notable non-selections, players who we thought were going to make it but didn't, and any surprise inclusions, which would include new players. So stay tuned for that. That is coming up probably within the next week. We would like to thank Mike Tripak, Make Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this media cast.